Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Masechtas Menachos daf Zayin. We're going to begin on Vav Amud Beis, 4 lines from the bottom. So we were learning the interpretation of the pasuk V'kamas Misham based on our Mishnah that if it was done improperly, can you redo the Kemitza in the exact same place, or does it just mean that it could be done in the 11th Amos, the place in which the Yisraelim could go, and therefore it's not limited to a more specific location. So, Masker Rav Nachman, Maiko Sabri Haitana, X Mitzas Psuin Avoidehi, if he holds that if you do Kemitza improperly, that it's considered to still be an Avoda, Afagav Doi Ovid Le Matin Kli, then it should be even if you didn't put it into a Kli. Says Rashi, Lepoisu Afil Loi Nasin Kaimitz Bekli Lo Miskin B'Chazara. It shouldn't make any difference. If in fact you hold that it's considered to be an avoda, then we should say even if you did not put into a kli, then it should still passel. If it's nothing, so ki matin kli mai havi. So what's the difference that he put into a kli? It doesn't really mean anything because it's not considered an avoda. So how do we make this distinction? So hadam Rav Nachman oilam avodahi. Really, when Kemitza is done by Psuin, Itakas and Avoida. So then why do we make a distinction? It was put to a Kli or not? V'lo Gamra Avoidasa, it's not considered to be the Avodas complete, Adi Avid La Matin Kli, until it's actually put into a Kli. And therefore, once it's put into a Kli, then it's too late. However, before then, it's okay. Yehachi, I feel lo Kiddush, so maybe even if it's not Kiddush, says the Gemara in Zayin Manaf, B'chima Hadule, and when you put it back, you're putting it back into the original Kli, and it should be puzzle. Says Rashi, oven matin Kli, so you already did an application. The Mali Kli Sharis Zeh, Mali Kli Sharis Acher. What's the difference which Kli Sharis is put into? So Rav Yochanan, Zaysameris, this is obviously a proof that Kli Sharis Emekachin El Madas, that it's only with the consent. Says Rashi, V'hadol Adaita Kaddish, and therefore if it wasn't done with Das, then even though it was put into a Kli Sharis, it's not going to be Mekadosh it. So Hamidas Mekachin, which is mashma, if you had the intention, then Itaka is Mekadosh. Rav Yochanan Kli Sharis Mahu Shikadosh Psul Nechatchilo Lekarev Yermele Ein Mekachin. So apparently it's not true. Even if it was done with Das, it's still not Mekadosh. So Amalei Ein Mekachin Lekarev. When Mekachin lives soul, it may not be Mekadosh for the level that you could actually bring as a carbon. Says Rashi, you can go in im kamat zar v'naisin l'kli ma'oshik tishinu kli laktiro. However, to passel it, it does work. Says Rashi, the kava hu kli b'kedusha ki avinu adaita l'kedusha v'loi matzah hadure. That once it was done, you could no longer do it again because it's already considered like Gemara Voda, and therefore it's true. When it comes to doing it by a zar, for example, or a apostle, so it's not going to be mekadosh it to the extent that you're going to be makrabit, but it's enough that it's considered to be enough to passel it. Rav Amram Oimer Kagayin Shechziro Labisa Gedusha Umekamitz. That what you did, says Rashi, you put into a bisa, says Rashi, a kli sharis shubo boil in mincha. It's on top and not in the airspace, so it's not even within the kli. So hechi kamatz elo kagayin shechziru labisa tefufa, that you put it on from the inside in this flour. Bikivan de kamatzla oven leguma. Once you do the kemitza, you made a cavity. So kimahadol gave demana kamahadole. So now you're returning it back into the kli. And when you return it, you're putting it on the side of the kli. So the fact that you shake the kli and it falls into the inside, it's like it was actually returned literally by a monkey, which means it doesn't have any meaning because it wasn't done properly. Question 11. Laman Diyarmid lo hiksher Rav Yosef the Rivav lahachser kmitzas psuin el kaidim shekidish b'kli b'kli kasha. So it's a shtickle hard to understand. Why does he say that you can only return it only if it was not yet put into a kli? Hari kishehichser hakaimitz, when you do the rest of the kmitza, l'char should become possible. So the answer is in Mekachin el Wadas, and therefore, since it wasn't done Wadas, therefore it's not an issue. Alternatively, Rav Amram says Shechzir Labisa Tefufa, so you return it into a kli which is not large, in which, as we said, it's a kli sharash shabol belulan mincha, that you like mincha is mixed into it. Umaksu b'sidi guma is returned to the side of like a hole of a heavily al daifin kli. It's like it goes on the top. Umamel chayzol guma, when it goes into the hole, v'nasa k'mi shechzir kaif. It's ki'ilu, now that it falls in, it's like, since you didn't do it, so therefore it doesn't have any meaning. Okay. Armali Rav Yirmali Rav Zera v'lukva k'gayin shechziru l'kli hamonach al gabi karka. Why don't we say it's like you put it onto the ground? The fact that it doesn't mention that must be that that's not an answer, because actually, if you do have it on the ground, then it's still okay. If you kaimsin from a kli which is on the ground, armale kanagas beboya, you're touching upon something which is not so simple. It's actually a question. The boilan de Rabbi Avimi tani menachos tani menachos be Rav Chisda ve'avimi be Rav Chisda tani ve'omer Rav Chisda kufi ta'avi. When it comes to, says Rashi, hakois toivos, many hits, beloy mi'avimi, were absorbed from Avimi. Koloim, says Rashi, shohaya minadoi, so he was excommunicated. Allah, the hashmaisa bol hachris, was to be announced. Ritzufan lamed yoim, for has to be consecutive, 30 days. Sheni v'chamisha v'sheni samach yomi, for 60 days. So Avimi Masechta Isyakra. Actually, Avimi forgot his learning. Isakale. V'asakam Rav Chisda led Kuri Gamre, and he went to him to be able to remind himself. So why did he go there? Let's look in Rashi. Avimi Masechta Menacha Isyakale. Nishtakha himene. He became forgotten. Allah daha shmaisa, says Rashi, Memsechtas Erechin de Tana Chada Shum Hayisaimim Lamed Yoim Vatanya Idach Shishim, is it 30 or 60 days? And Matarza Avimi Bol Hachris Ritzufin, if it's consecutive, Koimos Hashabbos Machris Lamed Yoim, has to be announced 30 days. Okay, but if it's Monday, Thursday, and Thursday, then it's 60 days. Okay. Anyway, so Velishachle Velesil Gabe. So Savar Hachim Mistayim Milsa Tvei, this would be more beneficial because of the effort that he put into it, as Rashi quotes the Gemara in Megillah, that you got him at Sasti. If you work hard, then you'll end up being more successful. So Pagam Rav Nachman Amalei Ketzad Kaimson, how exactly does this Kmitza go? Amalei Meklizet, from this Kli. So Amalei the Chi Kaimson Mekli Shal Gabi Karka. This is the whole point. Can you do Kmitza from the ground? Amalei the Magvel Kayin. The kohen lifted it up. So Ketzad Mikachin as a menachos, how can you be mekadosh and mincha with a kmitza? So Amalei noisel klizeh, you take it into this kli. V'chi mekachin mekli shal gabi kar. So 1 second. The chi mekachin mekli shal gabi kar. Amalei the magvel kohen. A kohen has to lift it up. So Amalei im kain kasrach the gimel kohanim. If that's the case, you should actually need 3 kohanim if it came with one on the ground. Especially that we know that it cannot be put in your left hand, as Rashi says, Shnayim l'hagbiyah, Shnei kelim, 2 to lift up 2 kelim, Echad sheyik moitzimena, 1 to do kmitza with it, Echad shenaisel l'seicha, 1 to put the flour into it, V'shlishi kaimitz, and the 3rd one the kmitza, V'kain echad, enu yochel hagbiyah, Shnei kelim, shein avodah b'smoil. A kain can't lift it up with one hand and the other hand because you can't do the avodah with the left hand. So Amalei, Tehei sricha, yig gimel ketamid, So maybe actually we need 13 Kohanim, as is brought down Mesachtes Yom, like by Talmud. So Eisvei Zeh Klal. Kol Kaim is a nice Kli. Anyone who's committed to put into a Kli, Hamoyelech, one who transports it, Hamakdir, Echel, Davar Shedarko Echel, V'chulu. The Ilu Magbia Ukatani. Doesn't mention anything about the person who lifts it up. So Tana Seder Avodas Noked, V'loi Seder Kohanim. It's only mentioning the amount of Avodas, but not the amount of Kohanim. So it's not necessarily a Raya. Okay. Bamine Midrav Sheshes, Mahu Likmoitz Mekli Shalabi Karka, can you commit from a cliff on the ground? So Malay, Puk Chaz, go and see. Ma'avtin Lagoi Arba Kohanim, there was 4 Kohanim, Nechnasim, that would enter into the Kodesh, Shnaim Biyadam Beis Sidachim, 2 of them would have the 2 orders of the Lechem Hapanim, which they would have 6 each, in each of their hands, Biyadam, and also the Shnei Bazichin, and there would also be Shnaim Biyadam, Shnei Bazichin, and the other 2 Kohanim would have the frankincense. The Arba, Mikad Milifnehem, there's 4 in front of them, Shnaim Litul Shnei Sedarim, 2 would take the breads, Ubeis Litul Beis Bazichin, and the other 2 Kohanim would take the Bazichin, as we continue to Zayin with Beis. Ve'ilu Magbias HaShulchan L'Katani. No one says that the shulchan has to be lifted up first, even though the shulchan is basically a kli, and therefore it's like a kli shal gabi karka. So lav amrit has. So therefore that's a raya. It says Rashi alma makli shal gabi karka hayu siluk bazichin matir nesalechem kikaimet shematir esamincha. So we see that just as it was taken up and put down, so too when it comes to the kmitza, you should be able to put it down and also take it from the ground too, because it doesn't require to lift up the shulchan at any point. So it must be that you could actually put it onto the ground. It's a riot. So our answer is, all right, so Hasam Seder Avodos Nakat, Hakanami Seder Avodos Nakat. So maybe you can just say it's just the amount of Avodos. It doesn't have anything to do with necessarily proving anything. No, so he said no midami. Hasam ki nachas min yada the kohanim. Over there mentions. It doesn't mention anything about the name, how many kohanim. Hachan nachas min yada kohanim. Here it specifically tells us the amount of kohanim that need to be done. Now, if it's true that you'd have to lift up the shulchan, then in fact it would have mentioned that as well. Navim isa listening magmia. No shmamina kaims mikli shagami karka shmamina. So stak as a raya that you could put it onto the ground. So Omer Rabba. Now I understand that you could put it on the ground, you can lift it up from the ground. Then kaimitz miel mikli. If you do kmitza from a kli shal gabi karka, you could do that. You could do the kmitza from a kli which is already on the ground. Shekem etzinu b'silch bazichin, just like the bazichin was on the ground, so to speak. It was in the arn, but on the ground. So therefore, you could remove the bazichin. So too, you were able to remove the kmitza. So mekanshin mincha b'kli shal gabi karka. You can also be mekanish the mincha by putting it into a kli on the ground. Shekem etzinu b'sider bazichin, because just like they put the bazichin onto the shulchan. So there's no question about those 2 things. Boy Rabba, Kiddush Kaimitz Mai. How about when it comes to doing Kiddush Kimut? Says Rashi, Dol Ashkan, we don't find, but Bezichin, Kishahu Misalkin, when you do the Siluk Bezichin, when you are taking them off, the Hainu Kemitza, like taking off the Kemitza, She Nois L'Shum Kli, that was put into a kli. El miyad maktiru. You would be makdir it immediately. The lavaina. Hilkach leikel mishet kiddush kaimitz mehasam. So how do we? What's the din that when you do the kemitza and at that point you don't put into a kli? So what's the status of it that way? So memincha elfin in law. Do we learn out from memincha or dam elfin in law, or do we learn out from dam? Says Rashi. What does that mean? So, Mikabolas Dam, when it comes to the Kabbalah of the Dam, accepting the Dam, the Pasuk says, V'ikrivu b'nei Aharon. So it must be in their hands. That's what we learn. Zu Kabbalas Hadam, V'kiddush Kaimis, Keneged Arba Vodesh Dam, Kemitza Keneged Shchita, etc. So it needs to physically be in his hands. So, Hadar Pashna, Medam Yelfin in law, that Taka has to be in his hands. Okay, Umi Oimer Rava Hachi, is that true that he said this? But Itmar Kaimet Shechalkum Mishnei Kalim. If let's say you have a community and you split it up into two kalim, so there's a half amount of each. Rav Nachman Oimer Enu Kodesh, Rav Oimer Kodesh. So maybe it's not going to be Kodesh because, as Rashi says, even if you mix it back together, nonetheless, it's not going to be Kodesh because when you split it, it was less than the shear for both. Maybe Isa, if that's true, Leilif Medam, why don't we learn out from Dam? My answer is Hadabe Rav Mahi. Rav actually retracted. So how do we know Taka you can't split it in half? Tani Rav Tachlif Amar Shmuel Kiddush Pachlis Mechnei Hazah. If let's say you did the Kiddush less than the proper measurement, but Kli Zeh Pachlis Mechnei Hazah B'Kli Zeh Lo Kiddush, and that situation won't work. V'Boilhu, but Dam what's the din when it comes to the Dam regarding the sprinkling? As Rashi says, in Kibol Madam Seirim, if you're Makabel from the Dam of the Sa'ir or Parm Nisrafim, Shetu'unin Hazoya, then it needs to be sprinkled on the 4 Hazois, and from a Kli, what is the din? So Hilchasahim, Hilchas Alialfinan, or Dilma Hasa, my time Dexev Tavo B'Mayim, Achanami Dexev Tavo B'Dam. So Ve'imar Rab Zreika, Rab Elazar, Af B'Dam Lo Kiddush. Also, Badam is not going to be Kiddush. Yomi Rava, Tanya Namihach, we also learn Bimnei Kayin Maniach, Vataval Vol Maspik. So when the Pasuk says Vataval, it has to be Vataval Voloi Maspik. You can't use it as a sponge, as you can't wipe your fingers onto the Kli. Badam means Shehe Badam Shir Tvila. Mikadai, from the very beginning, it has to have the right amount. Min Hadam Shiba Inyan. Which means that it has to be every single time that you put in the dam, that you do the sprinkling, you have to keep reapplying. You have to keep dipping each time. And this Gemara we've had before. Let's say you didn't have the proper measurement. Mikaro, Kasam Rachmana Badam, has to be the right amount up front. Because Rachmana Badam, maybe you can wipe some of the dam onto the Kli. Kasam Rachmana Bataval. Umin Hadam, Shibini Lumuti Mai, Samaravali, Muti, Shiraim, Shiba Etzma. The leftover dam which is on your fingers. You cannot do the dam application with that leftover. Rather, you need to dip each time, not 2 times if you have excess blood on your fingers. Messiah Rabbi Lezer, the Amr, Shirayim Sheba Etzba, the leftover blood on your fingers, Psul. Armale Ravin Bar Rav Adol Rava, so Amri Talmidoch, your student said, Amr Rav Amram Tanya, Haya Maza Tanya, Haya Maza Venitza, Hazam Yadai, and let's say you sprayed it out and it spilled out. Im ad shelo he's a tain kibus. If you didn't do hazah yet, you need to kibus on your begadim. However, mishihiza in tain kibus. Once you already did the hazah, it's not necessary for you to do kibus because the zrika has already been done. So my love ad shelo gamer hazasai mishigamer hazasai. So it all depends on whether the hazah is finished. Shemamina the shiraim shiba etzma ksherim. It must be actually a raya that the shiraim on your finger is okay. So lo ad shelo yatsa samiyado hazah tain kibus. The mashiyasa hazah miyadai. If it left your hand, v'nitza b'mashinishar ein tain kibus. Esvei baye gamar molahazais mikanech yad megufa shel para. It says that if you finish doing the sprinkling, you should wipe the blood onto the head of the animal. Gamar in, lo gamar lo. Only if it's finished, not if it's not finished. Since the blood must be valid each spraying to get your finger clean from the blood after all the spraying. So you wipe it in that way afterwards. Amalei gamar mekanech yadai. If you completed, you can wipe your hands. Lo gamar mekanech, that's ba'o. Only your fingers, which have blood. Bisham gamar when it's finished. Mekanech yada begufa shopara. Why do you put it onto the cow? The surface of parla enough. So it's mashma everything, even the blood. El lo gamer mekanech, that's ball. If you didn't finish, b'ma mekanech. What should you wipe it with? So the iyam b'guf shel parah boilus ne'meka mekanech yadav etzba b'guf shel parah. Look at Tani Hachish. Remember the little boy kinuach. So Rabbi b'svas mizrak, on the edge of the kli. K'dechsiv kipuri zahav v'goymer. Okay, we'll stop there. Let's look at some questions. Starting off with question 11. Well, man diyomer hichsher our Mishnah l'hachser kamitzas psulin el kodim shekidish akli kasha hari kishi hichser akaimitz l'duchdi kiddush v'nifsel. So he said, first of all, it's only medas, or that the dam was put onto the kli, and then it shook, and then it fell in. In that situation, it's ki'ilu like kamisha hichser kaif, like a monkey. 12. Minale l'rava the kaimitz makli shagabi kosher shagabi karka kosher. Minolan the kadosh kaimitz davka makli shagabi karka. So kimitza makli shagabi karka sheresh kamatzina basiluk bazichen, which I'm not sure I didn't write that down. By the siluk. Oh, over here from the v'ilu magbias shulchan lokatani. All right, so that's really the proof right there. Okay. As we said, because you don't have to lift up the shulchan. So the shulchan is kiyu like it's already on the ground. Right? So again, what do we see from here? It's Kamitza Mikli shall gavi karka kshera shechem matzinu matziluk mazichin tirtavai matirin umikri askara. Kiddush kaimitz davka Mikli shul gavi karka shechem matzinu mikabal sadam shekiddush kli b'mincha keneged Kabbalah Badam. Okay. Question TA 16. Ha'im makanshin mincha kaimitz b'kli shal gabi karka u'maha mokr was that. Okay. So it's the same question as basically question 12, it's just packaged a little bit differently. That's TA 16. So let's just get this down. So when it comes to a mincha, you could be makat, it could be makdishin, and the mokr is from the seed of bazichin. However, when it comes to kaimitz, the mincha you mean mekadosh, but the kaimitz you cannot be mekadosh because we went out from dam, as we said. Okay. Question TB 18. Amarav zar shekamitz yachzer moikum b'gemara kimbem b'seira maikum ashmol and rabo maskana. That is a good question. What I wrote is not correct. Question TB19 is actually the same thing. I wrote Emekanchin mincha al gabi karka kli deloi kaimitz al gabi karka kedin bezichin. So kaimitz is kedin bezichin, right? The other one is not because it's midam yelfinan. Adkan.